All right, so this is the Clayton and Chase blog, Writings on Writing. In this blog, we, Clayton and Chase, discuss our experience in our writing and critical inquiry class. We hope that you find what we have written here to be both informative and intriguing. So with that, we'll jump right into Chase's thoughts on his, no, that's
What?
mine,
Oh, that's yours. Whoops.
writing process.
Thank you, Clay. So, during the process of making my essay, and along with coming up with my topic, there were some things I struggled with, some things I relearned, and some things I liked. Starting with struggling, when I was doing my draft, I wish I had spent some more time on that. That was one of the most major parts I struggled with. When I had created my Anatomy bibliography, and then I was ready to do my draft, the draft wasn't for a little bit longer. So I completely forgot about everything I wrote. So when the time the draft came to do, a couple of days before, I had to go back and relearn everything. I had wished I spent some more time though on knowing what I was going to do and then how exactly I was going to plan everything out, besides just waiting until like the last-ish minutes to do everything. Another struggle I had was when I was working on the Anatomy bibliography and trying to make my topic. I decided that I wanted to do inner beauty versus outer beauty, but then I realized, with the help of my teacher, that it was too broad, so then I had to figure out how to narrow it down. Later on, when I talk about my thoughts on beauty, I will explain more about it. So I was able to come up with my topic, though, and my argument was that it was confidence, and how it connected better with inner beauty rather than outer beauty. Some other things that I learned relearned was to make the thesis statements. I normally don't do really well with introductions and thesis statements all that often. Normally I had a little struggle. But after watching this video by Shmoop, I had learned that it is sometimes easier to make thesis statements this way compared to other ways. Some tips and tricks to look out for instead of just saying a quote in it or definitions, and this helped me create a thesis statement. And also it helped with my introduction by saying what I want to. On to you, Clay.
All right, thanks. Up next, we're going to be going over my thoughts on my writing process. Just moving right along. Okay, so I began this project with the guiding concept of discussing beauty. This concept was a bit too broad for my paper, as delving into every aspect of beauty is something that took our class multiple classes to go over, and writing about all these aspects discussed would take much longer for me to write about than I had time for. Plus, I didn't want to do that. So, while I was searching for a topic for my paper, I came across an article in The Guardian. The article discussed how there were many stand-up comedians who were refused funding from an arts funding council on the basis of their stand-up not being considered real art. And it asked the question, why do some of these projects count as art and the others only count as comedy? I enjoy stand-up comedy a lot, so this immediately struck a chord with me, and I knew that this is what I had to write my paper on. The subject of stand-up comedy's art status proved to be a good one for my paper. It gave me something good to argue about, which is good when you're writing an argumentative essay. It also wasn't too broad or too narrow of a topic, and I was able to fully cover all that I wanted to write about without going too far over, as well as having enough to write about to fill an adequate amount of space. I'm happy with my choice of topic, as it was something that I had a personal interest in, and it fit the topic really well. Also, I got to watch some stand-up comedy bits as research. My first draft for this paper did end up being turned in past the due date that was assigned. Because of this, it became a lot more difficult for my paper to get peer-reviewed, and I got a worse draft grade. For anyone in a position similar to my own, I would highly recommend getting the first draft of their essay in on time. Overall, I found the writing process of this paper to be more enjoyable than I would have predicted. Having a personal interest in the topic that I decided on was really helpful in retaining my interest, even when I wasn't all that happy about needing to do any research. One thing that I wish I had prioritized more in my process was getting the first draft in on time, as not doing so led to a lot more problems down the road, as well as simply getting a worse grade on my draft. Now that we're done with the thoughts on the writing process section, I believe it is going to go into Chase's thoughts on beauty.
Thank you, Clayton. So when I first came into this class and learned what beauty was, my teacher asked me, "What do you think beauty is?" My first original idea was just something that someone used to describe something, more than just like saying like awesome or wow, just something to describe it in further deep. Well, throughout the class, I had learned multiple things about beauty. One of those things was being subjective versus objective. Objective meaning that the word beauty could have one meaning and that normally people's opinions didn't matter, compared to subjective, which means that people can have multiple meanings about the same thing. I personally think beauty is more subjective than objective because each situation with beauty that is being used in can have different meanings and different thoughts based on the people seeing it, the creator themselves, and how it's perceived. One of these examples is the banana duct taped to the wall, which was recent. A man named Marizotto had decided to make 3 artworks of bananas duct taped to a wall and sold for between $100,000 to $150,000 each. Well, I personally think this situation is subjective because since Marizotto didn't really give a description of why he put the banana on there until it became really popular, that people were starting to fight about it, it kind of changes the way that people saw the banana. Some people saw, this is actual art, I like what he was trying to do, and there's other people, which kind of would have been me, would have just walked up to the wall, took the banana off the wall, and ate it. I really didn't think this was art, honestly. It just didn't show any beauty, and I thought it was just like someone just decided, hey, I'm gonna put this banana on a wall, and it's art. As I said earlier that I had done a topic on inner versus outer beauty, I decided that it was too broad and I had to narrow it down. This is where I use the subjective part, and because I decided to make an argument that confidence has a relationship better with inner beauty than rather than outer beauty. One of these articles that helped me with my support was an article by Autumn Whitefield. She did an article based on her 40th birthday. She had turned 40 that day, and then people were saying, "Congratulations, you turned 40." A couple of days later, she thought about this more and kind of made her felt sad that she had turned 40. Based on people, actually, no, that's not what I want to say. When you turn an age, sometimes it could be great that you're like saying, "Oh, I turned 16, I can get my permit now. I turned 18, I can go get my license now," or something like that. Well, for when you get older, studies have shown that when you get older, more people get sadder and sadder each day because they're saying, "Oh, I'm getting older, my skin looks weird, I'm starting to not look beautiful anymore." What I really loved about her article was her opinion she gave right at the end, where she thinks that rather than us being sad, depressed, and thinking about, "Oh, this is so bad, why this is happening to me," that she says we should rather be focused on our happy moments, just being positive and spending time with our loved ones around us. I think this was really good and helped support my opinion that if you took this one step of confidence to not be what everyone else around you is being, but just to be you, this helps you improve and be happier. Some people may not disagree with you and saying like, "Oh, why did you wear that style today? That looks so bad," or just saying some really rude stuff about you. Personally, I think then if people say that to me, are they truly my friends? Are you just truly being rude to me? Personally, I rather stay positive and not be down the dumps. This helps me think better, and actually, I just don't see a personal use of outer beauty, such as makeup, clothes, styles, the stuff we wear, because it's only temporary. Let's say I got a new phone, the latest iPhone, for example. It's not really going to be the latest anymore. Give it a couple of months and Apple will make a new iPhone and everyone will want that one next. So I personally don't think that outer beauty can help you step in your confidence, while inner beauty has the more advantage in that point. Off to you, Clayton.
Thanks. Alright, so my thoughts on beauty. One task that was accomplished within the writing and critical inquiry class was the task of establishing a perspective on the nature of beauty. Many aspects of beauty were fairly concrete, such as what does not strike one as beautiful. Other aspects were not as concrete, such as whether or not beauty was primarily an objective thing or a subjective thing. The true nature of beauty is something that I changed my mind on my opinion of quite a few times. I began my writing in critical inquiry class believing that beauty was primarily subjective. The majority of the other people in my class also had this perspective. I actually changed my opinion about halfway through the class because everyone else in the class seemed to be in a consensus about this aspect of beauty, so I decided to stir up some controversy and argue that beauty is actually objective. I began this objective view just for the sake of making our in-class discussion a bit more interesting and controversial, but in arguing for the objectivity of beauty, I actually came to realize that an objective view of beauty was a lot more intuitive and reasonable than I had initially realized. After coming to this conclusion that beauty did have an objective state, my perspective was challenged once again. The subjective aspect of beauty became difficult to ignore. Yes, it was true that certain properties of things were universally beautiful, such as art containing the golden ratio or a truthful statement in opposition to a lie. But there was also an undeniable subjective aspect to beauty, an aspect that allowed variation among what can be considered beautiful from one person to another. Because of this, I began to take a more moderate and compromising view that maybe beauty was not entirely or concretely objective or subjective, but was a bit more of a gray area in which both statements hold truth depending on the context. Because of the ways in which both sides of the argument were so well backed up, it became increasingly difficult to say for certain that beauty was either objective or subjective, and became increasingly more intuitive to state that beauty was most likely a combination of both aspects. I would never definitively say that I, without a doubt, have the correct answer to the debate of the objective versus subjective beauty. It could be argued that since my current view doesn't take a particular stance, it doesn't even qualify as a true perspective at all, I could very well change my opinion on the subject in the future. But what I do know as a fact is that through this class, I have gained a deeper understanding on the debate that I initially had going in. My views have been continuously challenged, and through this have been improved. I've become a far more informed person on this debate than I previously even knew that the debate could have knowledge about. The debate of the nature of beauty is one that will continue on far into the future, both among various people of opposing opinions, and also among singular people who are simply evaluating their own view. That concludes our Writings About Writing blog presentation.